Are you writing a thought leadership book? Then you need to tell more stories in your book. In this previous video that I posted on my channel, I shared why you need to tell more stories in your thought leadership book, and I shared the 5 C's every good story. I'll link the video down for you in the description box. But once you know those 5 C's, how exactly do you tell a good story or stories in your book? That's exactly what I'm breaking down in this video. I'm going to show you how to tell effective stories throughout your thought leadership book in as little as 4 sentences. And those stories are going to be based on those 5 C's of every good story. I'm Denise Renee, your business book bestie. Here is my signature book, and these are some of my clients. I help professionals write books that make their business, career, or thought leadership brand visible. Hey, business book besties. I'm looking out for you. Of course, I'd love for you to enjoy the entire video, but I've gone ahead and put timestamps down below and in the description box to help you navigate this video. While you're there, please make sure that you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and put your thought leadership book writing questions down in the comment section. Housekeeping over, let's get into it. So, as I stated in the opening, you need to tell more stories in your nonfiction thought leadership book. And every good story has what I call the 5 C's of every good story. Now, in case you haven't heard me share them before, the 5 C's are character, care, context, challenge, and conclusion. And so my 4 sentence story framework is based on including and touching upon those 5 elements. And the method is derived by basically asking yourself 4 critical questions. And by writing 1 sentence to answer each of those 4 questions that I'm about to give you a little bit later in the video at this timestamp, you will be creating the foundations of a transformational story. Now, I want to be clear about something. What you're going to wind up creating with these 4 sentences is going to come out more like a summary or a synopsis. On its own, a summary or a synopsis might not read as engaging as a full blown emotional story. But just remember, what I'm sharing with you is a framework. You can build upon it and expand it to include more of the experiential elements that stories require in order to elicit an emotional response from your reader. But sometimes, particularly in nonfiction thought leadership books, a quick summary or synopsis, the kind that this 4 sentence story framework will generate for you, is enough. And it could be an effective little anecdote that you're using in one particular spot in your book to emphasize your point. Everything doesn't have to be war and peace. So, whether or not you use this framework to create one full story that you tell throughout your book, or lots of little stories, or synopsises, or summaries, or anecdotes throughout your book, what you wind up creating with this framework, it's going to be so impactful because it's going to do these 4 things for your book. Number one, the summary slash synopsis or the full blown story will you illustrate your point. Even though you are writing a nonfiction business book, it's a thought leadership book, and you're helping people navigate, business decisions or maybe a personal decision in their life. People don't just want facts and figures. They don't just need more information. They could prompt ChatGPT for that. They need human examples. They crave that even. They want to know that a human being was able to go through the process that you're sharing inside of your book. And your story or summary or synopsis will do just that. Number two, your story slash synopsis or full blown story that you create based on this 4 sentence structure will signal identification. One of the things that you'll hear me repeat throughout my content that talks about writing more stories in thought leadership books is that your stories need to make a connection, transfer an emotion, and influence a decision. Those 3 things can't happen unless the reader can identify themselves in your story. They've got to be able to see themselves as someone who's very much like the main character, or they need to be able to see themselves in a similar situation as the one that you're sharing in your story. Once they can identify themselves and see themselves in that situation, then they're going to get all of the feels, and then they're going to be in a position to make a decision. The third thing that this 4 sentence framework is going to help you do is that the synopsis or summary or the full blown story that you create as a result will demonstrate your empathy. No one wants to feel like they're being sold to or they're being scammed or they're just the latest victim of a grifter. People want to trust other human beings. They want to know that when they buy your book, they're buying into you. They can trust you. And the only way someone can trust you is when they feel seen, when they feel like you understand them. So your stories that demonstrate that either you yourself have been through the situations that you're talking about, or you've helped other people go through the same situation, that reader is going to feel like you see them, like you understand them, like you understand the challenges and the problems and the pain points that they have. It's a byproduct of them being able to identify with the main character or with the situation that you're describing. And the fourth thing that this framework is going to help you do when you create your synopsis or summary or a full blown story based on it is it's going to help establish your expertise because your reader is going to assume that you know what you're talking about because you're sharing your experiences. And you don't have to beat them up over the head. You don't have to be a hard sell. They're going to automatically assume you are an expert. And better still, you are their go to expert. There is no heavy lifting required. You just have to tell your stories effectively, and your reader will convince themselves. So let's talk a little bit about customizing the framework. Guys and gals, this is a framework. It is not a hard and fast, rigid mold or rule of thumb. So work with it. In that vein, there's a couple of things that you need to note. Number one, sometimes you might need more than one sentence to answer each question, which we haven't gotten to yet. Don't worry. We're going to dig into the four questions that you need to ask yourself in order to create your summary or story at this timestamp. We're getting there. Don't worry. But you might need a few extra sentences in order to provide context because that's what I'm doing here. I'm giving you context before I throw the framework on you. So the four sentences is basically a bare minimum. It's not a requirement. So it's okay if it takes you five, six, seven, or maybe even eight sentences to create your synopsis. Anything more than that, you're probably drifting away from the core elements of your story and there's some brevity that you just don't understand how to get to. The second thing to note is that this framework is going to produce something that's really quick and brief. It's either going to be a really quick story or a really quick synopsis of a scenario. Telling only one of these in your entire book is not going to cut it, okay? Now, if you're telling one story throughout all of the chapters of your book, then yes, it can cut it because you're going to be expanding it. But if you are making various different points and you just need, a quick anecdote here from when you worked with this company or another anecdote there from when you had an experience as a freelancer, then see this as something that can help you really flavor and season your book, especially if you use AI to assist you in writing. AI is going to suck the flavor out. Stories are going to infuse it right on back in. So, this framework is a pattern that you can duplicate and produce as many little or long stories as you need for your book. And then the third thing to think about is that this framework is infinitely scalable. So, as I said, you can tell one long, elaborate story that arcs throughout your book. And this four sentence framework will be at the core of that story. Because honestly, if you can't summarize your story very succinctly and briefly, what do we do? Okay. And I will say it is going to pull on your critical thinking skills a little bit to be able to identify what are the core and central issues that are the elements of a transformation story. Ask me how I know. I have a junior high school student on my hands, and we are working on them critical thinking skills and those summarizing skills and those writing skills and those reading skills. It came easy to me. It doesn't come easy to him. But you know what? Helping him is helping me to help you. And a little bit later on at this timestamp, I'm going to show you how to put this all into practice. So I think now we are ready to learn the four questions that you need to ask yourself in order to generate your 4 sentence story or summary. So, to write the bare minimum, or at least understand the bare minimum of a transformation story, you're going to ask yourself these 4 questions and answer them, or at least try to answer them with at least 1 sentence each. So, question number 1: who is the main character? Now, it is extremely important that your main character in your story is someone that your reader can relate to. If the main character happens to be you, because you have undergone a particular transformation or you were able to accomplish a particular goal. You don't want to show yourself as the person who has gotten to the mountaintop, all right? You don't want to show your main character. Maybe this is somebody that you've helped. You don't want to show your main character at the mountaintop. We're not there yet. Okay. We need to see them at the beginning of the journey. We need to see you at the beginning of your journey. So don't show us with the hero cape on and the muscles blaring and all of that kind of good stuff. Show us where you are at the beginning before you make this transformation or before you accomplish this particular goal. And the sentence that you create should be able to touch on the character and maybe a little bit of the context when it comes to looking at the 5 C's of a good story. The second question that you want to ask yourself in this 4 sentence story framework is, what is the main character's challenge and why does it matter? Another word for challenge is conflict. And you do not have a story without some kind of challenge, without some kind of conflict. But it's also important to understand why this problem or challenge or conflict matters. What are the stakes? And this is where your reader is really going to be able to identify, or should be able to identify and say, this character is going through this problem and challenge. This kind of reminds me of the thing that I'm going through. And this sentence that you create as an answer to this question should be addressing the challenge and the care part of the 5 C's of good stories. The third question that you'll ask yourself in this 4 sentence story framework is, what is the catalyst for change? Now, here is where you, as the guy, get to put your super suit on, but you're going to make sure you're like Spider Man or Clark Kent. You're going to keep that super suit hiding underneath your regular clothing, okay? We ain't ready to bear the super S on our chest just yet. But 9 times out of 10, in a thought leadership book, in sharing a transformational story, here is where you're going to introduce what your solution is. And your solution is the catalyst for the change. Now, if this is a story where you're talking about your own change, this is going to be where you discover that magical thing or that magical mental shift or whatever it is that helped you unlock and move forward towards your success. If you're telling a story where you're helping other customers or helping other people, then this is where you share with them what your methodology is or what your 5 steps are or whatever, what have you. So this is where you get to subtly insert yourself as the guy that has the secret super sauce. Okay. So again, like I said, you want to hide your superhero clothing under your regular clothing. Okay. We want to know that it's there, but we don't want to smack them upside the head with, I'm Clark Kent, I'm Superman. All right. We don't want to do that. So now the word catalyst, I did not use that in my 5 C's of good storytelling. It's kind of like the 6th C or the ghost C in terms of telling a great transformational story for business purposes. Okay. And then the fourth question that you're going to ask yourself in our 4 sentence story framework is, what is the result? What happens now that we had this catalyst? Now that we were introduced to this agent of change, what were the results that the change brought about? Now, obviously, this sentence is going to satisfy the conclusion part of the 5 C's of every good story. So, as you see, these 4 sentences take you through a transformational arc from where we started at the beginning and why we're going on this transformational journey, why it matters, through what was that point that turned everything around, all the way to how are things different and how are things better now that we've gone through this entire process. If you are not telling these types of transformational stories in your book, you might be wasting your time. okay? Because you're not going to get the results that you want from your book. You're not going to get the clients that you're looking for from your book. You're not going to get the industry opportunities and industry recognition that you want from your book. You're not going to get job offers or opportunities for consulting or coaching that you want to get, because if you cannot show and demonstrate how you're able to assist people in their transformational journey, they will not, they're, they're not going to buy into you, and they're not going to buy from you, whatever your products or services are. So you got to get your storytelling right. And big hint, even though I'm talking about transformational stories in your thought leadership book, understand, use this in everything. Use this when you're recording a 1 minute TikTok or shorts or reel. Use this when you're recording a long form 8 or 10 minute YouTube video. Sprinkle these types of transformational stories throughout your blog articles that you're writing on LinkedIn or Medium. Be sure you have a couple of these transformation stories on deck when you're visiting another podcast or you're being interviewed, or even when you're interviewing for a job, okay? Or when you're on a sales call with a prospect. Show them how you were able to take somebody else through a similar process that you're trying to get them to hire you for. This has wide-reaching implications. But let's bring this back to focusing on telling stories in your nonfiction thought leadership book. Are you working on a manuscript right now and you felt like something's kind of off? And maybe now that you're listening to me, you realize maybe you don't have transformational stories, or maybe you have stories, but you're not sure if they're really landing the way they need to, and you need help. Then I want to encourage you to check out my service called Editorial Assessment. It's where I get your manuscript, I print it out, get my readers on, and a pink pen, baby. And I read through your entire manuscript, go through it line by line, make my notes in the margins, and then I give you an audio recording and a report. I tell you at least three things that are working well in your manuscript, and at least three things, a lot of times it's four, but I'll tell you at least three things that you can do to help improve your manuscript. I'll let you know whether it's publication ready or what type of editing you need or what steps you need to take next with your manuscript to move it closer to being publication ready. Learn more and get started on this service at writingwithdeniserenee.com/assessment. I'll place a link for you down in the description box. Okie dokie. Let's get this story framework into practice. So, if you can answer each of these questions with at least one sentence each, you're going to come up with the perfect summary or synopsis. If you're really good, it'll feel like a story. But for the most part, what you create is going to be what I call often a head story. Now, I do not have time to go into what a head story is in this video, but I will be covering it in an upcoming video. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel with notifications turned on so that you do not miss my upcoming content that dives even deeper into storytelling or nonfiction thought leadership authors. But like I said earlier, you can always expand these summaries into longer scenes and include dialogue and more showing, not telling, so that it functions and feels more like an emotional story. But these 4 points are still going to be right at the core. So earlier in the video, I promised that I would show you how to put this framework into practice. And now we've arrived at that point. So here is an exercise that you can practice with. I want you to think of your favorite movie. Now summarize it with this 4 sentence framework. I'll go first. My favorite movie is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yes, baby. All three videos, all 9 hours. Okay. To me, that's one whole story just told in 3 parts. And usually every year around my birthday, which also happens to be Christmas, I like to do the whole marathon and I watch it and enjoy it. I didn't do it this year. I was busy working on content and client projects, but hey, I'll take another time real soon and get my Lord of the Rings in. But nonetheless, if you've never seen it, and baby, if you've never seen it, I don't know what rock you've been living under, but that's okay. I forgive you. I'm about to tell you the entire 9 hours worth of story in just a few seconds. So, question number one: who was the main character? My answer: Frodo Baggins is the main character. Question two: What's the main character's challenge and why does it matter? The world that Frodo lives in is threatened by a great evil that wants to enslave all of the beings in their world. The evil is tied to a magical ring in his possession. The destruction of the ring will destroy the evil, and all the species in their world will be saved to live in peace. Okay, yeah, that was 3 sentences, but I needed to provide some context so that we can understand why this challenge matters. Question 3: what is the catalyst for change? At a meeting of representatives of all of the beings in their world, Frodo volunteers to undertake the seemingly impossible task of destroying the ring. Now, if you are a connoisseur of this story, maybe you might identify another piece of the story that's kind of like the catalyst, but argue with your mama. For me, this is the catalyst, okay? Baby, I'm passionate about this story, okay? All right. And then number 4, what was the result? After a grueling journey spanning almost 2 years, Frodo overcomes incredible external challenges and internal conflict to destroy the ring and save his world. There you have it. 9 hours of chic cinema condensed into, was it 6 or 7 sentences and about a minute. Are there a lot of details left out? Yes. Can this summary be more of an emotional experience? Absolutely, yes. But does it get to the core of what the story is, why it matters, what the challenge is, and what happens in the end? Also, yes. Like I said, this is just going to create a summary, and clearly there's lots of room to expand. I mean, Tolkien wrote 3 books that were like this thick each. I know because I actually read them when I was a teenager. And then, Peter Jackson gave us 9 brilliant hours, and that's just what was on the screen. I don't even want to think about the amount of footage that was left on the editing floor. But I hope that this really illustrates my point. Get down to the core elements of the story that focus in on the transformation. I want you to try this exercise with your favorite movie or maybe a TV series that has been completed and not one of those, they canceled it and the story wasn't over. As long as the complete story has been told, you can try this with a complete TV series, or you can do it for a book or novel that you've read that you really enjoyed. Can you get it down to absolutely 4 sentences or at least no more than 8? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And if you do get something down to 4 sentences, drop it down in the comments because I want to read it. Now, like I said, you can use these little summaries that you're creating all throughout your book, in blog articles, YouTube videos, Instagram and Facebook reels, even in data heavy presentations for your next client pitch or for your next annual report. Instead of just showing charts and facts and figures, share stories, transformational stories. They're going to drive the point home like nothing else can. Let me give you another example that's a little bit closer to home, at least for me. So, in my book, Write Your Book 10 Mindset Hacks to Move You from Fear to Finished, I tell this overarching story about a prospective client named Carmen. Now, in the book, I tell the story in a pretty expansive way. I shared some of it in this video here. I'll link it down in the description for you to check it out so you could fact check my work. So here's how I would summarize the story using the 4 sentence story framework. Sentence 1: who's the main character? Carmen is a corporate lawyer who provides pro bono legal advice to immigrant small business owners. Question number 2: what's the challenge and why do we care? Carmen found herself repeating the same information over and over and wanted a way to share that information more efficiently, especially since she was doing pro bono work. Sentence number 3: what was the catalyst for change? After consulting with Denise Renee, Carmen overcame her doubts about whether or not her audience would read a book filled with legal advice and decided to move forward with writing her book. And sentence number 4: what is the result? Today, Carmen has distributed over 300 copies of her book, and her pro bono clients constantly report how the information has helped them avoid major legal situations in their business. Now, can you imagine sharing this kind of transformational story, inserting yourself in there real smooth so that people can see you as the expert that they need to turn to? hmm So I truly hope that this video has helped you see how telling more of the right stories in your nonfiction thought leadership book will help transform your reader's experience and your business. So, if you want to dive deeper into why it's worth it for you to tell more stories in your book and to get a better understanding of the 5 C's of every good story, watch this video next.